As many of you know, Stephen King writes about haunted hotels, killer clowns, and demonic cars. But let's be real, his true horror stories are about relationships. Take I Know What You Need. A romantic story, sure. If your idea of romance is, would you like your free will deep fried or scrambled? And speaking of Stephen King, if you've ever dreamed of staying at the Overlook Hotel, I have great news. You already have. It's called Your Last Relationship. Think about it. At first, everything seems perfect. Then the place slowly starts driving you insane. There's a creepy guy watching you sleep, and before you know it, you're running through a metaphorical hedge maze just trying to survive. Does that sound familiar? But here in the Café Noir, we don't run. We like to cook. And tonight, we're going to be making something just a little extra special for you guys out there. We've got, well, you'll just have to wait and see, because I don't want to spoil it just yet. Let's just say they're soft, they're sweet, and much like Ed in tonight's story, they're about to be completely unrecognizable. And we'll see you right here in the Café Noir after this.
From Television City in Hollywood.
The next course will be served in a moment.
The following program contains graphic language which may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
And welcome back. Now, today, our story is from Stephen King's Night Shift, another part of that collection. And this was originally released in Cosmopolitan, if you can believe that, in September of 1976. Now, what's cool about this story is, well, we all know Valentines Day is right upon us. And we all know how I feel about Hallmark holidays. So, that being said, I've decided with much thought and anticipation to bring you one of Stephen King's stories of love and companionship. But this is one of those guys. He knows your favorite movie, your dream vacation. He even knows where your keys are, which that right there should have been a red flag. But, I guess relationships just were a lot different in 1976. But you see, here in the Café Noir, we like our food the way King likes his horror. Deceptively simple, but deep fried in something sinister. So tonight, we're making some deep fried chocolate covered bananas. Now, many of you are wondering, why green? Why'd you buy them so green? Because these are at their ripest and will allow us a lot of leeway, where these are better for baking breads and making cakes. In fact, they are a great substitute when you don't have eggs, and I'm going to show you that later on. But for now, I think you guys should sit back, relax, and let me introduce you to Elizabeth. and her relationship with Ed. Edward Jackson Hamner, Jr., no less. And kind of like me, his socks don't match. But that's okay, because here in the Café Noir, we know exactly what you need. I Know What You Need by Stephen King. I know what you need. Elizabeth looked up from her sociology text, startled, and saw a rather nondescript young man in a green fatigue jacket. For a moment, she thought he looked familiar, as if she had known him before. The feeling was close to déjà vu. And then it was gone. He was about her height, skinny, and twitchy. That was the word. He wasn't moving, but he seemed to be twitching inside his skin, just out of sight. His hair was black and unkempt. He wore a thick horn-rimmed glasses that magnified his dark brown eyes, and the lenses looked dirty. No, she was quite sure she had never seen him before. You know? She said. I doubt that. You need a strawberry double-dip cone, right? She blinked at him, frankly startled. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she had been thinking about taking a break for an ice cream. She was studying for finals on the 3rd floor of the Carrolls, the student union, and there was still a woefully long way to go. Right? He persisted, and smiled. It transformed his face from something over-intense and nearly ugly into something else that was oddly appealing. The word cute occurred to her. That wasn't a good word to afflict a boy with. But this one was. When he smiled. She smiled back. And before she could roadblock it behind her lips, this she didn't need. To have to waste time brushing off some weirdo who had decided to pick the worst time of the year to try to make an impression. She still had 16 chapters of Introduction to Sociology to wade through. No thanks, she said. Come on! You hit him any harder, you're gonna give yourself a headache. You've been at it for 2 hours without a break. How would you know that? I've been watching you, he said promptly. But this time his gammon grin was lost on her. She already had a headache. Well, you can stop, she said, more sharply than she had intended. I don't like people staring at me. I'm sorry. She felt a little sorry for him, the way she sometimes felt sorry for stray dogs. He seemed to float in the green fatigue jacket, and yes, he had on mismatched socks. One black, one brown. She felt herself getting ready to smile and held it back. I've got these finals, she said gently. Sure, he said. Okay. She looked at him for a moment, pensively. Then she lowered her gaze to her book. But an after-image of the encounter remained. Strawberry double dip. When she got back to the dorm, it was 11:15. Alice was stretched on her bed listening to Neil Diamond and reading the story of O. I didn't know they assigned that in EH-17, Elizabeth said. Alice sat up. Broadening my horizons, darling. Spreading my intellectual winds. Liz? Didn't you hear what I said? No, sorry, You look like somebody conked you one, kid. I met a guy tonight. Sort of a funny guy at that. Oh? He must be something if he can separate the great Rogan from her beloved Tex. His name is Edward Jackson. Hamner. Junior, no less. Short, skinny. Looks like he washed his hair last around Washington's birthday. Oh, and mishmatched stocks. One black, one brown. I thought you were more the fraternity type. It's nothing like that. Alice, I was studying at the Union on the 3rd floor of the think tank, and he invited me down to the grinder for an ice cream cone. I told him no, and he sort of slunk off. But once he started me thinking about ice cream, I couldn't stop. I just decided to give up and take a break, and there he was, holding a big, drippy strawberry double dip in each hand. I trembled to hear the announcement. Elizabeth snorted. Well, I couldn't really say no, so we sat down. It turns out he had sociology with Professor Brainer last year. Will wonders never cease? Lord of mercy, gosh into Christmas. Listen, this is really amazing. You know the way I've been sweating this course. Yes, you talk about it practically in your sleep. I've got a 78 average. I've got to have an 80 to keep my scholarship. And that means I need at least an 84 on the final. Well, this Ed Hamner says Brainer uses the same final every year, and Ed's eidetic. You mean he's got a photographic memory. Yes, look at this. She opened her sociology book and took out 3 sheets of notebook paper covered with writing. Alice took them. This looks like multiple choice stuff. It is. Ed says it's Brainer's last year's final, word for word. Alice said flatly, I don't believe it. But it covers all the material. Still, I don't believe it. She handed the sheets back. Just because this spook, he isn't a spook, don't call him that. Okay, this guy hasn't got you bamboozled into memorizing this and not studying at all, has he? Oh, of course not, she said uneasily. And even if this is like the exam, do you think it's exactly ethical? Anger surprised her, ran away with her tongue before she could hold it. Oh, that's great for you. Dean's List every semester, your folks paying your way, you aren't... Hey, I'm sorry. There was no call for that. Alice shrugged and opened O again, her face carefully neutral. No, you're right. Not my business. But why don't you study the book too? Just to be safe? Of course I will. But mostly she studied the exam notes provided by Edward Jackson Hamner. When she came out of the lecture hall after the exam, He was sitting in the lobby, floating in his green fatigue jacket. He smiled tentatively at her and stood up. How'd it go? Impulsively, she kissed his cheek. She could not remember such a blessed feeling of relief. I think I aced it. Really? That's great. Like a burger? Love one, she said absently. Her mind was still on the exam. It was one Ed had given her, almost word for word, and she had sailed through. Over hamburgers, she asked him how his own finals were going. Don't have any. I'm in honors, and you don't have to take them unless you want to. I was doing okay, so I didn't. Then why are you still here? I had to see how you did, didn't I? Ed, you didn't. That's sweet, but... The naked look in his eyes troubled her. She'd seen it before. She was a pretty girl. Yes, he said softly. Yes, I did. Ed, I'm grateful. I think you saved my scholarship. I really do, but I have a boyfriend, you know. Serious? He asked with a poor attempt to speak lightly. Very, she said, matching his tone. Almost engaged. Does he know how lucky he is? Does he know how lucky? Well, I'm lucky too, she said, thinking of Tony Lombard. Beth, he said suddenly. What? She asked, startled. Nobody calls you that, do they? Why, no. No, they don't. Not even this guy? No. Tony called her Liz. Sometimes Lizzie, which was even worse. He leaned forward. But Beth is what you like best, isn't it? She laughed to cover her confusion. Whatever in the world? Never mind, he grinned. I'll call you Beth. That's better. Now eat your burger. Then her junior year was over, and she was saying goodbye to Alice. They were a little stiff together, and Elizabeth was sorry. She supposed it was her own fault. She had crowed a little loudly about her sociology final, and when grades were posted, she had scored a 97, highest in the division. Well, she told herself, as she waited at the airport for her flight to be called, it wasn't any more unethical than the cramming that she had done on the third floor of that carrel. Cramming wasn't real studying at all. It just rote memorization that faded away to nothing as soon as the exam was over. She fingered the envelope that poked out of her purse. Notice of her scholarship loan package. It's for her senior year. $2,000. She and Tony would be working together in Boothbay, Maine. Well, this summer the money would earn them enough to put them over the top. And thanks to Ed Hamner, it would be a beautiful summer. Clear sailing all the way.
For more than 3 years, these waters have been safe and calm, but the sea makes no promises.
That's a shark. And I know what a shark looks like because I've seen one up close.
Now, just when they thought the waters were safe again, the legend continues. The all-new Jaws 2.
In the West End and at a cinema near you from Boxing Day.
I'm Freddy Krueger, your worst nightmare come alive. And now I'm on your telephone. Dial this number now and I'll tell you Freddy's favorite bedtime stories. Gruesome new tales of murder and mayhem. Frightful heartstoppers of pain and gore. So dial this number now if you dare. And prepare for a scare. Freddy Krueger has a special message just for you.
$2 for the first minute, 35 cents each additional minute.
They thought the nightmare was dead and buried. They were wrong. Jason lives.
Happy Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives. Rated R.
Starts Friday, August 1st at a theater near you.
Well, alrighty. We have met Ed. You know, he's got the charm of a gas station magician and the vibe of a man who's mesmerized your social security number just in case. But you know, for a minute, let's talk about real magic. The kind that happens when you take an ordinary banana, cut it in half, and shove a stick up the open end. Now, this is how I personally went about doing that. I cut it in half, and again, we talked about how I bought them green. I left the peel on. And it looks like our water is just about ready. We're going to do a double boiler kind of thing. First, we got the water heating up. Now we've got the pan, and we're going to start with just a half a teaspoon of butter. Shove that down in there and let that go. We've got our wooden spoon. Don't try to use other spoons. It's going to fuck you up every time and make your life a lot more incredibly harder. So, stick with the wood. We got our wooden spoon. We got our bananas. And we're going to take and shove that stick right up the opening. Talk about sticking up his ass. So, my friends, we can honestly say that these bananas have a stick up their ass. But you know, I see most of you are probably questioning what's the point. Well, the point mainly is to make sure that we can get a full coating on the banana while trying to save the fucking chocolate from getting all over us. See, most of you familiar with the Killer Kitchen, we had this apron, cool, whatever. Well, I still have the bloody apron put up, but I just didn't feel that this show was appropriate for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Or in my case, the Oildale Chainsaw Massacre. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's starting to melt. That's getting good. Now, the real fun begins. You see, I tried to find some melting chocolate, almond bark, something, whatever. Dollar General didn't have it, and I didn't feel like taking my ass nowhere else. So we just bought a couple of bars of regular dark chocolate. See if you guys can get a better look here. Now, if you'll look right over here, you'll be able to get a good solid look. We're going to take this, and the reason we're using dark chocolate is because, well, we've got the sweetness, we've got all the flavors ready to go, but you know, we need something dark. Something that matches those of us here in the cafe. So, we're gonna play Psycho for just a minute. You wanna smash that up real good. Just like that. Whoa, knocking it off. Thank you. Cam Pam saved us again. Okay, so you know what? I don't think this is working so good. Here's something else that works. right on the table. Crack it a couple times. Got that ready to go. Got one more. Just like that. Now, I'm going to melt this chocolate, and when we come back from our next break, we will be melting this in, and we'll see you after that. Oh yeah, that's fucking perfect. I'm gonna take another half a teaspoon of butter, shove that in on top, and I'm gonna start mixing this up. Now the thing is, you can't stop stirring. You gotta keep it going constant. You stop stirring, you burn your chocolate. You burn your chocolate, you burn your food, you fucked it up. Gotta start over. And nowadays, chocolate's getting to be mighty expensive. I mean, talk about George Orwell 1984, you know, a little piece of chocolate for a month or whatever for your rations. That's about how it's starting to feel to go out and buy a chocolate bar nowadays. Alright, now we're gonna need some more butter, so let's add some more butter. There we go. You're watching the Café Noir, and I am the Café Killer. We'll see you right here after this. Warning. Loneliness can kill you. Learn black magic and Haitian voodoo today. Are you lonely? Is disparity carving you up like a roast? Are you going nowhere and feeling like nobody cares? Lost in transition? Do you feel like nothing has changed but you? Are you still feeling alone and while hiding from the world? Do you just wish you knew what it is you need? Well, don't worry. Try forevermore. Learn black magic and Haitian voodoo in 12 easy steps. Make that special girl yours by knowing her every desire. And don't forget your dark and white magic chocolate cravings. 1 bite and she's yours for life. 2 bites and she's yours forever. Well, I guess it's fair enough to say that the chocolate did not work exactly as intended. But we found out why. You see, almond bark is not made the way almond bark used to be made. And they have all new directions. I'm used to almond bark 70s and 80s and beyond, like back when food was still food and you could trust it. Well, I've come to understand that what I've done wrong is that my way of melting the chocolate doesn't work because it's not real chocolate. And the almond bark is not real almond bark. Thank your local legislation. But, you know, I guess I really should point out we need to get back to Elizabeth because, well, just like our bananas, well, she has no idea she's about to be dipped in hot oil. Stick around and we will see you.
For more than 3 years, these waters have been safe and calm, but the sea makes no promises.
That's a shark. And I know what a shark looks like because I've seen one up close.
Now, just when they thought the waters were safe again, the legend continues. The all-new Jaws 2.
In the West End and at a cinema near you from Boxing Day.
I'm Freddy Krueger, your worst nightmare come alive. And now I'm on your telephone. Dial this number now and I'll tell you Freddy's favorite bedtime stories. Gruesome new tales of murder and mayhem. Frightful heartstoppers of pain and gore. So dial this number now if you dare. And prepare for a scare. Freddy Krueger has a special message just for you.
$2 for the first minute, 35 cents each additional minute.
They thought the nightmare was dead and buried. They were wrong. Jason lives. Happy Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives. Rated R.
Starts Friday, August 1st at a theater near you.
But it was the most miserable summer of her life. June was rainy. The gas shortage depressed the tourist trade, and her tips at Booth Bay Inn were mediocre. Even worse, Tony was pressing her on the subject of marriage. He could get a job on or near campus, he said, and with her student aid grant, she could get a degree in style. She was surprised to find the idea scared rather than pleased her. Something was wrong. She didn't know what, but something was missing. Out of whack. Out of kilter. One night, late July, she frightened herself by going on a hysterical crying jag in her apartment. The only good thing about it is that her roommate, a mousy little girl named Sandra Ackerman, was out on a date. The nightmare came in early August. She was lying in the bottom of an open grave, unable to move. Rain fell on her from a white sky onto her upturned face. Then Tony was standing over her, wearing his yellow high-impact construction helmet. "Marry me, Liz," he said, looking down at her expressionlessly. "Marry me, or else." She tried to speak, to agree. She'd do anything if only he would get her out of this dreadful muddy hole. But she was paralyzed. "All right, then," he said. "It's a or else." He went away. She struggled to break free from her paralysis and couldn't. Then she heard a bulldozer. A moment later, she saw it, a high and yellow monster, pushing a mound of wet earth from the front of the blade. Tony's merciless face looked down on her from the open cab. He was going to bury her alive. Trapped in her motionless, voiceless body, she could only watch in dumb horror. Cackles of dirt began to run down the sides of the hole. A familiar voice cried, "Go! Leave her now! Go!" Tony stumbled down from the bulldozer and ran. A huge relief swept over her. She would have cried had she been able. And her savior appeared, standing at the foot of the open grave, like a sexton. It was Ed Hamner, floating in his green fatigue jacket, his hair awry, his horn-rimmed glasses down to the small budge at the end of his nose. He held his hand out to her. "Get up," he said gently. "I know what you need. Get up, Beth." And she could get up. She sobbed with relief. She tried to thank him. Her words spilled out on top of each other, Ed only smiled and gently nodded. She took his hand and looked down, only to see her footing. And when she looked up again, she was holding the paw of a huge, slavering timber wolf with red hurricane lantern eyes and thick, spiked teeth open to bite. She woke up, sitting bolt upright, her nightgown drenched with sweat. Her body was shaking uncontrollably, and even after a warm shower and a glass of milk, she could not reconcile herself to the dark. She slept with the light on. A week later, Tony was dead. She opened the door in her robe, expecting to see Tony. But it was Danny Kilmer, one of the fellows he had worked with. Danny was a funny guy. She and Tony had double dated with him and his girl a couple of times, but standing in the doorway of the second floor of her apartment, Danny looked not only serious, but ill. "Danny?" she said. "What?" "Liz," he said. "Liz, you've got to hold on to yourself." Oh, God. He pounded the jamb of the door with one big knuckled dirty hand, and he saw he was crying. "Danny, is it Tony? Is something..." "Tony's dead," Danny said. But he was talking to air. She'd fainted. The next week passed in kind of a dream. The story pieced itself together, woefully brief in a newspaper account, and from what Danny had told her over a beer at the Harbor Inn, they had been repairing drainage culverts over on Route 16. Part of the road was torn up, and Tony was flagging traffic. A kid driving a red Fiat had been coming down the hill. Tony flagged him, but the kid never slowed. Tony had been standing next to a dump truck, and there was no place to jump back. The kid in the Fiat had sustained head lacerations and a broken arm. He was hysterical and also cold sober. The police found several holes in his brake lines, as if they'd overheated and then simply melted through. His driving record was A1. He simply had been unable to stop. Tony had been a victim of that rarest of automobile mishaps, an honest accident. Her shock and depression was increased by guilt. The fates had taken out of her hands the decision on what to do about Tony, and a sick serpent part of her was glad so, because she hadn't wanted to marry Tony. Not since the night of her dream. She broke down the day before she went home. She was sitting on a rock outcropping by herself, and after an hour or so, tears came. They surprised her with their fury. She cried until her head hurt and her stomach ached, and when the tears passed, she felt not better, but drained and empty. And that was when Ed Hamner said, "Beth?" She jerked around, her mouth half filled with the copper taste of fear, expecting the snarling wolf of her dream. But it was only Ed Hamner, looking sunburned and strangely defenseless without his fatigue jacket and blue jeans. He was wearing red shorts that stopped just ahead of his bony knees and a white t-shirt that billowed on his thin chest like loose sail. and then rubber thongs. He was smiling, and the fierce sun glitter on his glasses made it impossible to see his eyes. Ed? She said tentatively, half convinced this was some grief-induced hallucination. Is it really? Yeah, it's me. How? I've been working at Lakewood Theater in Shogun. I ran into your roommate. Alice? Is that her name? Yes. She told me what happened. I came right away. Poor Beth. He moved his head, only to agree to her so, but the sun glare slid off his glasses and she saw nothing wolfish, nothing predatory, but just a calm, warm sympathy. She began to weep again and staggered a little with the unexpected force of it. Then he was holding her, and then it was all right. They had dinner at the Silent Woman in Waterville. It was about 25 miles away, which was maybe exactly the distance she needed. They went in Ed's car, a new Corvette, and he drove well, neither showily or fussily, as she guessed he might. She didn't want to talk, and he seemed to know it. She didn't want to be cheered up. He seemed to know it. He played quiet music on the radio. And without consulting her, seafood. She thought she wasn't hungry, but when the food came, she fell too ravenously. When she looked up again, the plate was empty, and she laughed nervously, and Ed, he was just smoking a cigarette and watching her. The grieving damsel ate a hearty meal, he said. You must think I'm awful. No, he said. You've been through a lot, and you need to get your strength back. It's like being sick, isn't it? Yes, just like that. He took her hand across the table and squeezed it briefly, then let it go. But now, it's recuperation time, Beth. Is it really? Yes, he said. So tell me, what are your plans? I'm going home tomorrow. After that, I don't know. Well, you're coming back to school, aren't you? I don't know. After this, it seems so trivial. A lot of the purpose seems to have gone, and all the fun. It'll come back. That's hard for you to believe now, but it's true. Try it for 6 weeks and see. You got nothing better to do. It seems the question. That's true, I guess, but can I have a cigarette? Sure. They're menthol, though. Sorry. She took one. How did you know I don't like menthol cigarettes? He shrugged. You just don't look like one of those, I guess.
You don't see many wild stallions anymore.
You don't see many cigarette ads either anymore. But nope, you don't see many mares.
No, you don't see
Just like
many
you don't
wild
see many women
stallions
either.
anymore. And even if he did run off 3 of your best mares, he's one of the last of a wild and very singular breed.
Real men enjoy the refreshing taste of Marlboro. And here in the Café Noir, we do too.
Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
Get in today for pre-GST savings on still chainsaws, like Mini Boss from only $395, a saving of $30.
Back in my day,
don't wait
we
to
could
save
just chase
$45
people
on
through
Wood
the
Boss
streets
at
with a
only
chainsaw.
$650.
Now they
Still,
call it
Australia's
racist
most
because
popular
we use a
chainsaw,
weed whacker.
Farm Boss, is now just $995.
Your nearest Still specialist dealer is at Penrith Mower and Equipment Centre, 87 York Road, Penrith. Phone 4721 7744.
Who's the big guy with the muscles?
Once upon a time, in the dark ages before participation trophies, kids had to win their own battles. Of course, if this toy line were out today, He-Man would have a rainbow scarf and Skeletor would be wrapped in an American flag.
He-Man and Skeletor each sold separately. Castle Grayskull also sold separately from the Masters of the Universe collection from Mattel.
Now, we have learned 3 lessons tonight. Thus far, and the night is still young. We learned if you use too much butter or oil in what they call chocolate, it will become a mess and it won't work. We have learned how to take that chocolate and make a creamy glaze. So, follow me. No, please. You see, we have our bananas sitting frozen. And here they are. And what we got was, even though it wasn't exactly what we were looking for with that nice creamy coat, well, my friends, what we got instead is something very interesting. And I think, well, the texture itself definitely matches the story. So what we're going to do is we're going to start deep frying these. She smiled. You're funny. Do you know that? He smiled neutrally. No, really. For you, of all people, to turn up. I thought I didn't want to see anyone. But I'm really glad it was you, Ed. Sometimes it's nice to be with someone that you're not involved with. That's it, I guess. She paused. Who are you, Ed? Besides my fairy godfather, who are you really? It was suddenly important to her that she know. He shrugged. Nobody much. It's one of those funny-looking guys you see creeping around campus with a load of books under one arm. Ed, you're not funny-looking. Sure I am, he said and smiled. Never grew all the way out of my high school acne. Never got rushed by a big frat. Never made any kind of splash in the social world. Just a dorm rat making grades, that's all. And when the big corporations interview on campus next spring, I'll probably sign on with one of them and Ed Hamner will be disappeared forever. That would be a great shame, she said softly. He smiled, and it was a very peculiar smile, almost bitter. What about your folks? She asked. Where you live? What you like to do? Another time, he said. "I want to get you back. Got a long plane ride tomorrow, and a lot of hassles." The evening left her relaxed for the first time since Tony's death, without the feeling somewhere inside a mainspring was being wound and wound to the breaking point. She thought sleep would come easily, but it did not. Little questions nagged. Alice told me. Poor Beth. But Alice was summering in Kitty, 80 miles from Skohagen. She must have been at Lakewood for a play. The Corvette, this year's model, expensive. A backstage job at Lakewood hadn't paid for that. Were his parents rich? He ordered just what she would have ordered herself. Maybe the only thing on the menu she would have eaten enough of to discover that she was hungry. The menthol cigarettes. The way he had kissed her goodnight. Exactly as she had wanted to be kissed. And you've got a long plane ride tomorrow. He knew she was going home because she had told him. But how had he known she was taking a plane? Or that it was a long ride? It bothered her. It bothered her because she was halfway to being in love with Ed Hamner. "I know what you need." Like the voice of a submarine captain, tolling off phantoms. The words he had greeted her with followed her down to sleep. He didn't come to the tiny Augusta airport to see her off, and waiting for the plane, she was surprised by her own disappointment. She was thinking about how quietly you can grow to depend on a person, almost like a junkie with a habit. The hype fools himself that he can take this stuff or leave it, when really, "Elizabeth Rogan," the PA blared. "Please pick up the white courtesy phone." She hurried to it, and Ed's voice said, "Beth? Ed, it's good to hear from you. I thought maybe that I'd meet you?" He laughed. "You don't need me for that. You're a big, strong girl. Beautiful, too. You can handle this. Will I see you at school?" Yes, I think so." "Good." There was a moment of silence. Then he said, "Because I love you. I have from the first time I saw you." Her tongue was locked. She couldn't speak. 1,000 thoughts whirled in her mind. He laughed again, gently. "No, don't say anything. Not now. I'll see you. Then there'll be time. All the time in the world. Good trip, Beth. Goodbye." And he was gone, leaving her with the white phone in her hand and her own chaotic thoughts and questions. September. Elizabeth picked up the old pattern of school and classes, like a woman who has been interrupted knitting. She was rooming with Alice again, of course. They had been roomies since freshman year, when they had both been thrown together by the housing department computer. They had always gotten along well, despite differing interests and personalities. Alice was the studious one, a chemistry major and a 3.6 average. Elizabeth was more social, less bookish, with a split major in education and math. They still got on well, but a faint coolness seemed to have grown up between them. Elizabeth chalked it up to the difference of opinion over sociology final, and didn't mention it. The events of the summer began to seem dreamlike. In a funny way, it sometimes seemed that Tony might have been a boyfriend she had known in high school. It still hurt to think about him, and she avoided the subject with Alice. But the hurt was an old bruised throb, and not that of the bright pain of an open wound. What hurt more was Ed Hamner's failure to call. A week passed, then 2. Then it was October. She got a student directory from the union and looked up his name. It was no help. After his name were only the words Mill Street, and Mill was a very long street indeed. And so she waited, and when she was called for dates, which was often, she turned them down. Alice raised her eyebrows but said nothing. She was buried alive in a 6-week biochem project that spent most of her evenings at the library. Elizabeth noticed the white long envelopes that her roommate was receiving once or twice a week in the mail, since she was usually back from class first, but she thought nothing of them. The private detective agency was discreet. It did not print its return address on its envelopes. When the intercom buzzed, Alice was studying. You get it, Liz. Probably for you anyway. Elizabeth went to the intercom. Yes? Gentleman door caller, Liz. Oh, Lord. Who is it? She asked, annoyed, and ran through her tattered stack of excuses. Migraine headache. She hadn't used that one this week. The desk girl amused. His name is Edward Jackson Hamner. Jr., no less. Her voice lowered. His socks don't match. Elizabeth's hands flew to the collar of her robe. Oh, God! Tell him I'll be right down. No, tell him it'll be just a minute. No, a couple of minutes, okay? Sure, the voice said dubiously. Don't have a hemorrhage. Elizabeth took a pair of slacks out of her closet, took out a short denim skirt, felt the curls in her hair and groaned and began to yank them out. Alice watched all this calmly, without speaking, but she looked speculatively at the door for a long time after Elizabeth had left. He looked just the same. He hadn't changed at all. He was wearing his green fatigue jacket and it still looked 2 sizes too big. One of the elbows of his horn-rimmed glasses had been mended with electrician's tape. His jeans looked new and stiff, miles from the soft faded-in look that Tony had effortlessly achieved. He was wearing 1 green sock and 1 brown sock, and she knew she loved him. Why didn't you call before? She asked, going to him. He stuck his hands in his pocket in his jackets and grinned. Well, I thought I'd give you some time to date around, meet some guys, figure out what you want. I think I know that. Good. Would you like to go to a movie? Anything, she said. Anything at all. As the days passed, it occurred to her that she had never met anyone, male or female, that seemed to understand her moods and needs so completely, so wordlessly. Their tastes had coincided. While Tony had enjoyed violent movies of the Godfather type, she seemed more into comedy and non-violent dramas. He took her to the circus one night when she was feeling low, and they had a hilariously wonderful time. Study dates were real study dates, not just an excuse to grope on the 3rd floor of the Union. He took her to dances and seemed especially good at the old ones, which she loved. They had won a 50s stroll trophy at the homecoming nostalgia dance. More important, he seemed to understand when she wanted to be passionate, and he didn't force her or hurry her. She never got the feeling that she had with some of the other boys she had gone out with, that there was an inner timetable for sex, beginning with a kiss goodnight on date 1 and ending with a night in some friend's borrowed apartment in date 10. The Mill Street apartment was Ed's exclusively. A 3rd floor walk-up. They went there often, and Elizabeth went without the feeling that she was walking into some minor league Don Juan's passion pit. He didn't push. He honestly seemed to want what she wanted, when she wanted it. And things progressed. When school reconvened following the semester break, Alice seemed strangely preoccupied. Several times that afternoon, before Ed came to pick her up, they were going out to dinner. Elizabeth looked up to see her roommate frowning down at a large manila envelope on her desk. Once, Elizabeth almost asked about it, then decided not to. Some new project, probably. It was snowing hard when Ed brought her back to the dorm. Tomorrow, he asked. My place? Sure, I'll make some popcorn. Great, he said, and kissed her. I love you, Beth. Love you too. Would you like to stay over? Ed asked evenly. Tomorrow night? All right, Ed. She looked into his eyes. Whatever you want. Good, he said quietly. Sleep well, kid. You too. She expected that Alice would be asleep and entered the room quietly, but Alice was sitting up at her desk. Alice, are you okay? I have to talk to you, Liz, about Ed. What about him? Alice said carefully. I think that when I finish talking to you, we're not going to be friends anymore. For me, that's giving up a lot, so I want you to listen carefully. And now, a word from the Café Killer. Ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and ghouls and goblins alike. Everybody out there knows that I like to roll. But when I like to roll with quality. That's why I roll with the roll. And when I'm looking for a puff, and again I'm looking for the best quality, I puff with the puff. Puff, puff past the roll. Available in select locations near you. Now that's quality you can taste.
Someday, Archie wants to buy a business.
I want to see Kelsey's bar turned into Bunker's bar.
At 8:30, 7:30 Central and Mountain.
Tomorrow night on CBS.
After 22 years, Norman Bates is home. They say he's all right. Psycho 2. The mystery continues. Rated R. Starts Friday at a theater near you. Coming to save the world this summer.
You won the D. Snyder Weekend! Call 1-800-STEAMER! Send the steamer, gets your home cleaner!
Maybe you better not say anything. I have to try. Elizabeth felt her initial curiosity kindle into anger. Have you been snooping around, Ed? Alice only looked at her. Were you jealous of us? No. If I'd been jealous of you and your dates, I would have moved out 2 years ago. Elizabeth looked at her perplexed. She knew what Alice said was the truth, and suddenly felt afraid. Two things made me wonder about Ed Hamner, Alice said. First, you wrote me about Tony's death and said how lucky it was that I'd seen Ed at Lakewood Theater, how he came right over to Booth Bay and really helped you out. But I never saw him, Liz. I was never near the Lakewood Theater last summer. But how did he know Tony was dead? I have no idea. I only know he didn't get it from me. The other thing was this eidetic memory business. My God, Liz. He can't even remember what socks he's got on. That's a different thing altogether, Liz said stiffly. Ed Hamner was in Las Vegas last summer, Alice said softly. He came back in mid-July and took a motel room in Permaquid. That's just across the Booth Bay Harbor town line. Almost as if he were waiting for you to need him. That's crazy. And how would you know Ed was in Las Vegas? I ran into Shirley Dinocchio just before school started. She worked in the Pines restaurant, which is just across from the Playhouse. She said she never saw anyone who looked like Ed Hamner. So I know he's been lying to you about several things. And so I went to my father and laid it out, and he gave me the go-ahead. To do what? Elizabeth asked, bewildered. To hire a private detective agency. Elizabeth was on her feet. No more, Alice! That's it! She would catch the bus into town, spend tonight at Ed Hamner's apartment. She had only been waiting for him to ask her anyway. At least, no, Alice said. Then make up your own decisions. I don't have to know anything except that he's kind and good and... Love is blind, huh? Alice said, and smiled bitterly. Well, maybe I happen to love you a little, Liz. Have you ever thought of that? Elizabeth turned and looked at her for a long moment. If you do, you've got a funny way of showing it, she said. Go on then. Maybe you're right. Maybe I owe you that much, goon. You knew him a long time ago, Alice said quietly. What? P.S. 119, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Elizabeth was struck dumb. She and her parents had lived in Bridgeport for 6 years, moving to their present home the year after she had finished the 2nd grade. She had gone to PS 119, but... Alice, are you sure? Do you remember him? No, of course not. But she did remember the feeling she'd had the first time she'd seen Ed. The feeling of deja vu. The pretty ones never remember the ugly ducklings, I guess. Maybe he had a crush on you. You were in the 1st grade with him, Liz. Maybe he sat in the back of the room and just watched you. Or on the playground. Just a little nothing kid who already wore glasses and probably braces, and you couldn't even remember him. But I'll bet he remembers you. Elizabeth said, "What else?" The agency traced him from school fingerprints. After that, it was just a matter of finding people and talking to them. The operative assigned to the case said he couldn't understand some of what he was getting, and neither do I. Some of it's scary. It better be, Elizabeth said primly. Ed Hamner, Sr. was a compulsive gambler. He worked for a top-of-the-line agency in New York and then moved to Bridgeport, sort of on the run. The operative says that almost every big-money poker game and high-priced bookie in the city was holding his markers. Elizabeth closed her eyes. These people really saw you got a full measure of dirt for your dollar, didn't they? Maybe. Anyway, Ed's father got in another jam in Bridgeport. It was gambling again, but this time he got mixed up with a big-time loan shark. He got a broken leg and a broken arm somehow. The operative says he doubts it was an accident. Anything else? Elizabeth asked. Child beating? Embezzlement? He landed a job at a 2-bit Los Angeles ad agency in 1961. That was a little too close to Las Vegas. He started to spend his weekends there, gambling heavily and losing. Then he started taking Ed Jr. with him, and he started to win. You're making all this up. You must be. Alice tapped the report in front of her. It's all here. Liz, some of it wouldn't stand up in court, but the operative says none of the people he talked with would have had a reason to lie. Ed's father called Ed his good luck charm. At first, nobody objected to the boy being in the casinos, even though it was illegal. His father was a prize fish. But then the father started sticking to just roulette, playing only odd even, red-black. By the end of the year, the boy was off limits in every casino on the strip, and his father took up a new kind of gambling. What? The stock market. When the Hamners moved to LA in the middle of 1961, they were living in a $90 a month cheese box, and Mr. Hamner was driving a 52 Chevrolet. At the end of 1962, just 16 months later, he had quit his job and they were living in their own home in San Jose.
You can't make me kill her.
Psycho 2, rated R. Starts Friday, June 3rd at a theater near you.
Wanna go psycho with me, Elvira, here at the Bates Motel? Look for me wherever they sell mug root beer. And enter the Go Psycho with Elvira contest. You can be my guest at Universal Studios in Hollywood for a monstrous bash at the Bates Motel. Shower, anyone? This Halloween, go psycho with Elvira and win a party with mug root beer and me.
I love my mug.
I love it.
In trying to make an artistic statement, one should be careful not to let one's personal aroma do the talking. In order not to offend the critics, I recommend Right Guard Sports Stick. It provides maximum protection and the freshest scents, a sublime palette of odoriferous emanations. After all, a true artiste should be remembered for his inspiration, not his perspiration. Right Guard Sports Stick. Anything less would be uncivilized.
You won the D. Snyder weekend! Call 1-800-STEAMER! Send the steamer, gets your home cleaner!
Sunday night. Starting at 8/7 Central and Mountain, it's coming.
You better do something about this one, because I don't intend to go through that hell again. Over there! Hold on!
My son and husband are still out there.
Roy Scheider in the television premiere of Jaws 2. Sunday on ABC.
Ah, that golden brown color. That's when you know that it's too late. Just like Elizabeth finally realizing, hey, maybe my boyfriend shouldn't know my every thought without me telling him. Now, speaking of which, let's see just how deep Elizabeth is in now. She's gotten herself in over her head pretty obviously at this point. And here we are, back in the Café Noir. Now, here is something interesting I think you guys will like. Normally, we do our egg mix, and sometimes we might or might not add a little seasoning. You've seen me do that. Well, here, this time around, I decided that chocolate-covered bananas just isn't going to cut. So we're going to add to our mixture some strawberry extract. There you go. That's a lot of it. Now, that'll be a fun cut. $142. This is going to be fun to cut. Thank God yours isn't going to hold the audio. Now, here's how we're going to start. We've added our strawberry extract into our egg. And maybe we used a little much, because trust me, it definitely smells like strawberry here in the cafe. Now, we're going to let that settle in, and then we're going to give it a good another stir. But first, I'm going to rinse this out, set it aside, and we are going to work on our batter mix. First, we're going to take about a tablespoon of ground nutmeg. Nice even layer across the top. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push that envelope just a bit and do a slight layer. What the hell's going on here? Oh, okay. A light layer of our ground cinnamon. Oh, well, I guess it helps if you open it. Hey, what can I say? Something about like that. Oh, it sounds like the killer kitchen phone is ringing. Shall we answer it together? Hello, you're live on the air with the Café Noir. How can we help you?
Hey there, it's me, Susan.
Hey, Susan, you are live on the air, and we are filming Café Noir right here, and I'm glad you called. How did you like that last meal that we prepared for you?
Oh, that was interesting, very much so.
Right on.
I have a quick question. I was talking to you last time about my cast iron pans, and I'm not sure what you told me to put to clean the inside of them.
Oh,
water.
A little bit of baking soda, some water, slide them in the oven, turn the oven to 350 and let them bake for about 20 to 30 minutes. You should be able to go in with a sponge or a soft scrubby. You know, the dollar bag thing you get at the Dollar General. Come in there, it should wipe everything right out. Same thing with your microwave. Coffee cup, 2 tablespoons of some baking soda. Heat up the water. Everything in your microwave will wipe right out. No scrubbing, no chemical, no soap necessary.
Dang, how easy was that? So, how long are you guys going to be on live?
Well, actually, right now we're filming. We're just about to throw some bananas into a frying pan. And we are watching, well, actually, I'm narrating and we are watching the video I made for Stephen King's I Know What You Need. Because we needed something just in time for Valentine's Day.
Oh, hey, cool. That sounds interesting. Maybe I'll come by tomorrow, but tonight I'm busy taking care of business here, so I got some pumpkins to boil up.
Well, you take care of business, and thank you for being a special guest on the air.
Hey, thanks for calling. Thanks for letting me talk. Appreciate the information. I'll do just that then.
Okay. We'll talk to you later. A friend of the Café Noir. You know, everybody says I should have had more special guests. Well, you guys got one tonight. Now, back to business. You see, what we're going to do here is, as we take this poor chocolate-covered banana, who's already been through enough humiliation, and we're going to completely soak it in this egg. Just soak it, just like we do with our meat. And now the fun part. See, we're going to take... Oh, I skipped a step. You see, the phone rang. We're going to add one more thing to our powder mix. We are going to take what's left of our Halloween sprinkles that I've been saving onto. And we're going to put them on in here. Now, you don't want to do too many. You just want a little bit to bleed in. Now we're going to take our whisk. It's pretty good, but it needs a little more. spilled my beer. That's alcohol abuse, I think. All right. Now that's about what we're going to use for our mix on the banana. So now, we've got our poor banana completely soaked in egg. And we're going to roll it in something dry and lifeless. And if this dish did have an equivalent, it would definitely be Stephen King's Pet Sematary. It's innocent at first, but, well, let's just see. Oh, you'll notice this one did lose its stick. Don't worry about that. We're just going to pull out a thing of tongs and pull it out. In fact, you'll notice we actually have to do these one at a time, and you'll see why. Because this does not take long. You don't have to cook it. It's not like your average deep fry. This is like a couple seconds, let that batter cook, and it's fucking out. It's done. Now, you guys will notice that we've started putting a warning label on our show. It's because I do have a foul mouth. I do have a bad attitude, and sometimes I'm just downright rude, obnoxious, drunk, and everything that probably doesn't belong on television. Ergo, why I'm on the internet. Oh, listen to that sizzle. And this is where we decide it's absolute fate. We could back out now and save ourselves the trouble, but nah. Let's cook it and see how far it goes. See, once you've rolled all this in, getting it coated and everything, and it's good to go, this right here is going to be a treat that all of your friends and company will talk about for weeks. And I guarantee your kids will be begging you every weekend to do it. And now that Donald Trump is back in office, by next year, eggs will be affordable again. It's going to take a little while for him to fix all the mistakes from the Democrats. But, you know, speaking of Democrats and Stephen King have more in common than just politics. You see, they both speak a good game. They both give you a great story. And neither one of them knows how to end the fucking story. They just end up leaving you sitting there fucked and wondering what the hell you were just looking at and reading. Oh yeah, that's just about there. Right. Now, we got our dish. And there is the first of many.
Okay. There it is.
Almost looks like a deep fried jalapeno. Boy, are you in for a surprise. So now, we're going to keep coating these. We're going to keep filling them up. And you know, again, we could back out. We could say enough is enough. This story's getting a little much. No way. I've got to see how Elizabeth is going to handle the next set. And you know, Ed does really talk a great game. Ed, he's the type of guy most girls probably dream of. Well, you know what? I'll tell you something from personal experience. If it sounds too good to be true, it just might be. This is the Café Noir. We're back on track, and that train is running out of fucking control. Let's fucking head out until we crash. Mr. Hamner was driving a brand new Thunderbird, and Mrs. Hamner had a Volkswagen. You see, it's against the law for a small boy to be in the Nevada casinos, but no one could take the stock market page away from him. Are you implying that that he could... Alice, you're crazy. I'm not implying anything. Unless maybe just that he knew what his daddy needed. I know what you need. It was almost as if the words were spoken into her ear, and she shuddered. Mrs. Hamner spent the next 6 years in and out of various mental institutions, supposedly for nervous disorders, but the operative talked to an orderly who said she was pretty close to psychotic. She claimed her son was the devil's henchman. She stabbed him with a pair of scissors in 1964, tried to kill him. Liz? Liz, what is it? The scar, she muttered. We went swimming at the university pool on open night about a month ago. He got a deep dimpled scar on his shoulder. Here. She put her hand just above her left breast. He said a wave of nausea tried to climb up her throat. She had to wait for it to recede before she could go on. He said he fell on a picket fence when he was a little boy. Shall I go on? Finish. Why not? What can it hurt now? His mother was released from a very plush mental institution in the Sac Joaquin Valley in 1968. The three of them went on a vacation. They stopped at a spot in Route 101. The boy was collecting firewood when she drove the car right over the edge drop-off above the ocean with both her and her husband in it. It might have been an attempt to run Ed down. By then, he was nearly 18. His father left him $1 million. Stock portfolio. Ed came east a year and a half later and enrolled here. And that's the end. No more skeletons in the closet. Liz, aren't there enough? She got up. No wonder he never wants to mention his family. But you had to go dig up the corpse, didn't you? You're blind, Alice said. Elizabeth was putting on her coat. I suppose you're going to him, right? Because you love him, right? Alice crossed the room and grabbed her arm. Will you get that sulky, petulant look off your face? For a second, think. Ed Hamner is able to do things the rest of us only dream about. He got his father a stake on roulette and made him rich playing the stock market. He seems to be able to will winning. Maybe he's not some kind of low-grade psychic. Maybe he's got precognition. I don't know. There are people who seem to have a dose of that, Liz. Hasn't it ever occurred to you that he's forced you to love him? Liz turned her head slowly. I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life. Is it? He gave you that sociology test the same way he gave his father the right side of the roulette board. He was never enrolled in any sociology course. I checked. did it because it was the only way he could make you take him seriously. Stop it, Liz cried. She clapped her hands over her ears. He knew the test, and he knew when Tony was killed, and he knew when you were going home on a plane. He even knew just the right psychological moment to step back into your life last October. Elizabeth pulled away and headed for the open door. Please, Alice said. Please, Liz, listen. I don't know how he can do these things. I doubt even if he knows for sure. He might not mean to do you any harm, but he already has. He's made you love him by knowing every secret thing you want and need, and that's not love at all. That's rape. Elizabeth slammed the door and ran down the stairs. She caught the last bus of the evening into town. It was snowing more heavily than ever, and the bus lumbered through the drifts and had blown across the road like crippled beetles. Elizabeth sat in the back, only one of 6 or 7 passengers, 1,000 thoughts in her mind. Menthol cigarettes, the stock exchange, the way he had known her mother's nickname was Dee Dee. A little boy at the back of the first grade classroom making sheep's eyes at a vivacious little girl too young to understand that I know what you need. No, I do love him. Did she? Or was she just simply delighted at being with someone who always ordered the right thing, took her to the right movie, or did what she wanted, or go anywhere that she wanted to go? Was he just some kind of psychic mirror, showing her only what she wanted to see? The presents he gave her were always the right presents. When the weather had turned suddenly cold and she had been longing for a hairdryer, who gave her one? Ed Hamner, of course. Just happened to see one on sale at Days Inn, he said. She, of course, had been delighted. That's not love at all. It's rape. The wind clawed at her face, and she stepped out of the corner of Main and Mill, and she winced against it as the bus drew away with a smooth diesel growl. Its taillights twinkled briefly in the snowy night for a moment, and then were gone. She had never felt so lonely in her life. He wasn't home. She stood outside his door, and after 5 minutes of knocking, non-pulsed, it occurred to her that she had no idea what Ed did or whom he saw when he wasn't with her. The subject had never come up. Maybe he's raising the price for another hairdryer in a poker game. With a sudden decision, she stood on her toes and felt along the top of the door jamb for a spare key she knew he kept there. Her fingers stumbled over it, and it fell to the hall floor with a clink. She picked it up and used it in the lock. The apartment looked different with that gone. Artificial, like a stage set. It had often amused her that someone who cared so little about his personal appearance should have such a neat picture book domicile. Almost as if he had decorated it for her and not himself. But of course that's crazy. Wasn't it? It occurred to her again, as if for the first time, how much she liked the chair she sat in when they studied or watched TV. It was just right, the way Baby Bear's chair had been for Goldilocks. Not too hard, not too soft, just right, like everything else she had associated with Ed. There were 2 doors opening off the living room. One went to the kitchenette, the other to his bedroom. The wind whistled outside, making the old apartment building creak and settle. In the bedroom, she stared at the brass bed. It looked neither too hard nor too soft, just right. An insidious voice smirked. It's almost too perfect, isn't it? She went to the bookcase and ran an eye aimlessly over the titles. One jumped at her eyes and she pulled it out. Dance crazes of the 50s. The book opened cleanly to a point some 3/4 through. A section titled The Stroll had been circled heavily in red grease pencil, and in the margin the word Beth had been written in large, almost accusatory letters. I ought to go now, she told herself. I can still save something. If he came back now, I could never look him in the face again, and Alice would win. Then she'd really get her money's worth.
Yes, sir, it was a dandy trip. Of course, we's all of my tuckers from sleeping setting up, but Pearl's old truck run just fine, and her boy drove all the way.
Winston?
No, Jethro Bodine. That's that big, tall, good-looking...
No, Mr. Clavitt, I meant, would you like a Winston cigarette?
I don't know as I've ever seen one of them before.
Oh, try one.
Mighty good smelling tobacco. What's that white stuff in there?
Oh, that's the Winston filter. But it's what's up front that counts.
You mean the tobacco?
Oh, a cigarette is only as good as the tobacco that's in it. With Winston's filter blend up front, it's like money in the bank. You're going to like Winston's.
I reckon I'll decide that for myself.
Yes, sir.
I like it. This here Winston tastes good.
Like a cigarette should.
The Beverly Hillbillies has been presented by Winston. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you'll try Winston, because Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
You don't see many wild stallions anymore. No, you don't see many wild stallions anymore. And even if he did run off 3 of your best mares, he's one of the last of a wild and very singular breed. Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
Ladies and gentlemen, it seems as though tonight's episode decided to take more than just inspiration from Mr. King. We gave you an episode. It had its ups, it had its downs, it had its ins, it had its outs, and it all made a point. But just like Stephen King, the ending of our story has completely fallen apart. So, with that being said, I think we should get to the conclusion of I Know What You Need. And when we come back, we'll show you the finished product. And then I fear that it must be that time to bid you adieu, because tonight has just not worked. But hey, it's okay, because we had some fun, we smoked some weed, we had a couple beers, and we had a good time. This is the Café Noir, and I'm Vincent Victorian. But she couldn't stop, and she knew it. Things had gone too far. She went to the closet and turned the knob, but it didn't give. Locked. On the off chance, she stood on her tiptoe again and felt along the top of the door, and her fingers felt a key. She took it down, and somewhere inside, a voice said very clearly, "Don't do this." She thought of Bluebeard's wife and what she had found when she opened the wrong door. But it was indeed too late. If she didn't proceed now, she would always wonder. She opened the closet and had the strangest feeling that this is where the real Ed Hamner Jr. had been hiding all the time. The closet was a mess. A jumbled rickrack of clothes, books, an unstrung tennis racket, a pair of tattered tennis shoes, old prelims and reports tossed helter-skelter, a spilled pouch of Buckram Riff pipe tobacco. His green fatigue jacket had been flung in one corner. She picked up one of the books and blinked at the title. The Golden Bough. Another. Ancient Rites, Modern Mysteries. Another. Haitian Voodoo. And a last one, bound in old, cracked leather. The title almost rubbed off the binding by much handling, smelling vaguely like rotted fish. Necronomicon. She opened it at random, gasped, flung it away, the obscenity still hanging before her eyes. More to regain her composure than anything else, she reached for the green fatigue jacket, not admitting herself she meant to go through its pockets. But as she lifted it, she saw something else. A small tin box. Curiously, she picked it up and turned it over in her hands, hearing things rattle inside. It was the kind of box a young boy might choose to keep his treasures in. Stamped in raised letters on the tin bottom were the words, Bridgeport Candy Co. She opened it. The doll was on top. The Elizabeth doll. She looked at it and began to shudder. The doll was dressed in a scrap of red nylon, part of a scarf she had lost 2 or 3 months back at a movie with Ed. The arms were pipe cleaners that had been draped in stuff that looked like blue moss. Graveyard moths, perhaps. There was hair on the doll's head, but it was wrong. It was fine, white, flax, and it was taped to the doll's pink gum eraser head. Her own hair was sandy blonde and coarser than this. This was the way her hair had been when she was a little girl. She swallowed, and there was a clicking in her throat. Hadn't they all been issued scissors in the first grade? Tiny scissors with a rounded blade, just right for a child's hand? Had that long ago little boy crept up behind her, perhaps at nap time? And Elizabeth put the doll aside and looked in the box again. There was a blue poker chip with a strange 6-sided pattern drawn on it in red ink. A tattered newspaper obituary. Mr. and Mrs. Edward Hamner. The two of them smiled meaningless out of the accompanying photo. And she saw that same 6-sided pattern had been drawn across their faces, this time in black ink, like a paw. 2 more dolls, one male, one female. The similarity in the faces in the obituary photograph were hideously unmistakable. And something else. She fumbled it out, and her finger shook so badly she almost dropped it. A tiny sound escaped her mouth. It was a model car. The sort small boys buy in drugstores and hobby shops and then assemble with airplane glue. This one was a Fiat. It had been painted red. And a piece of what looked like one of Tony's shirts had been taped to the front. She turned the model car upside down. Someone had hammered the underside to fragments. "So you found it, you ungrateful bitch!" She screamed and dropped the car in the box, his foul treasure spray across the floor. He was standing in the doorway, looking at her. She had never seen a look of hate on a human face. She said, "You killed Tony." He grinned unpleasantly. "You think you can prove it?" "It doesn't matter," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I know, and I never want to see you again. Ever. And if you do anything to anyone else, I'll know, and I'll fix you. Somehow." His face twisted. "That's the thanks I get? I gave you everything you wanted. Things no other man could give. Admit it, I made you perfectly happy. You killed Tony!" She screamed it at him. He took another step in the room. "Yes, and I did it for you. And what are you, Beth? You don't know what love is. I loved you from the first time I saw you over 17 years ago. Can Tony say that? It's never been hard for you. You're pretty. You never had to think about wanting or needing or about being lonely. You never had to find other ways to get people to have you, to love you. There was always a Tony to give them to you. All you ever had to do was smile and say please." His voice rose a note. "I could never get what I wanted that way. Don't you think I tried? It didn't work with my father. He just wanted more and more. He never even kissed me goodnight or gave me a hug until I made him rich. And my mother was the same way. I gave her her marriage back. But was that good enough for her? She hated me. She wouldn't come near me. She said I was unnatural, that I gave her nice things. Beth, don't do that. Don't. She stepped on the Elizabeth doll and crushed it, turning her heel on it. Something inside her flared in agony, and then it was gone. She wasn't afraid of him now. He was just a small boy, shrunken in a young man's body. And his socks didn't match. "I don't think you can do anything to me now, Ed," she told him. "Not now. Am I wrong?" He turned from her. "Go on," he said weakly. "But leave my box. At least do that." "I'll leave the box, but not the things in it." She walked past him. His shoulders twitched as if he might turn to try and grab her, but then they slumped. As she reached the second floor landing, he came to the top of the stairs and called shrilly after her. "Go on then! But you'll never be satisfied with another man after me. And when your looks go, and men stop trying to give you everything you want, you'll wish for me. You'll think of what you threw away." She went down the stairs and out into the snow. Its coldness felt good against her face. It was a 2-mile walk back to the campus, but she didn't care. She wanted the walk, wanted the cold, wanted it to make her clean. In a queer, twisted way, she felt sorry for him. A little boy with a huge power crammed inside a dwarfed spirit. A little boy who tried to make humans behave like toy soldiers and then stamped on them in a fit of temper when they wouldn't or when they found out. And what was she? blessed with all the things he was not, through no fault of his or effort of her own. She remembered the way she had reacted to Alice, trying blindly and jealously to hold on to something that was easy rather than good, not caring. When your looks go and men stop trying to give you everything you'll want, you'll wish for me. I know what you need. But was she so small that she actually needed so little? Please, dear God, no. On the bridge between the campus and town, she paused and threw Ed Hamner's scraps of magic over the side, piece by piece. The red-painted Fiat model was last, falling end over end into the driven snow until it was lost from sight. And then she walked on.
They sent him on a covert mission. He found an ally worthy of his respect.
What do you want?
Survive. And an enemy worthy of his fury. I'm coming to get you. Stallone is back as Rambo.
You take me with you?
First Blood, Part 2, rated R. Starts Wednesday, May 22nd at a theater near you.
Archie calls the shots.
I wouldn't have believed that Stretch was a Jew. I mean, he wasn't a doctor or a lawyer in the dress business, nothing like that.
I have chosen the Will You Tell Overture, which I shall play with my 10 tiny little fingers on my prize-winning face.
I don't know what I'm doing here. Talking to a man who in the last election didn't like Ford.
That's right.
Didn't like Carter.
Right.
So he wrote in Richard Nixon.
All in the Family, weekdays.
For God's sakes, the neighbors will think you're a wild woman.
On Friday, August 13th, an all-new three-dimensional process will put you in the picture, whether you want to be there or not. Friday the 13th, Part 3 in Super 3D. Join Jason in the woods on his day, if you dare. Friday the 13th, Part 3 in Super 3D, rated R.
Friday the 13th, Part 3 opens Friday the 13th at selected theaters and drive-ins.
Scream if you can.
He's doing it again.
Sleep if you dare. Freddy is back with a brand new nightmare. On a rush. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3, Dream Warriors, rated R. Now playing at a theater near you.
Okay, so we got a guy that can read people's minds, manipulate people, and basically control destiny. Buddy, you had one job and you still managed to screw it up? Really? Well, if you're gonna be an evil mastermind, at least be committed to it, will you? I mean, I gotta tell you. Looking for my beer. If I could make these things happen, well, first of all, Elizabeth, or Beth, well, she's a bitch to begin with. And, you know, we'll go in on her roommate in a minute. But let's be real here. Let's be absolutely real. Buddy, you can manipulate shit. You can have anything you want happen. And you're worried about some girl that you liked in the first grade? Really? Where's your fucking head? And Beth, why the fuck would you even listen to that dumbass roommate of yours? Alice is a dumb bitch. You called it from the start. She was jealous. Oh, well, if I'd have been jealous of you and your dates, I would have moved out 2 years ago. No, you wouldn't have. No, you wouldn't have. Because you knew rooming with fucking Beth meant that people were going to be nicer to you. They were going to treat you better. You had a better chance at a date. But no, you're sitting there, you want to read the story of O. Yeah, nice reading. For those of you younger audiences, because of YouTube standards, and there are some rules I can't break, go look it up. I tell you what, it's nothing worse than what they put in all the fucking schools today anyway. The only difference is the story of O is a little more realistic. And it's not propaganda, it's just what it is. And you know, as far as Alice goes, I mean, this bitch, she puts her nose where it doesn't belong. Oh, we're roommates, and puts her head down. The whole story acting like Miss Innocent, but then she's going around doing fucking background checks and shit. And keep in mind, this is 1976. That shit wasn't easy and it wasn't cheap. That bitch went out of her way to fucking destroy this girl's life. Well, you know what? Let me be real. I'll tell you what. Shit. You know what? Let's like this. Courtesy of the professor. Not too bad. Not too bad. Got a nice taste, good flavor. Up in smoke, that's where my money goes. In my lungs, and sometimes up my nose. When troubled times begin to bother me, I take a toke. All my cares go up in smoke. I was gonna give you guys a piece of my mind and tell everybody some shit, but you know what? I think I'd rather sit here, play some quiet jazz, take care of the killer dishes, and call it a night. So we're gonna clean up the mess, have some fun. And for those of you at home, just so you guys get an idea, behind the scenes, these right here, we've got quite a bit of a mess to take care of. I'm the Café Killer, and you're watching the Café Noir. We'll see you on the next episode.